What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Still Curtain Podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Jaggi, editor of StillCurtain.com, and joining me, as always, is Still Curtain contributor Shayne Kubas. Shayne, we're going to talk Steelers training camp preview today. Camps are on the horizon. Some of them started this week. Most of them start next week. That's when the Steelers will go to camp at July 23rd. And then we'll get practices after that. The first 4 practices are unpadded, and they'll really hit their ground running from there. But we want to break down the biggest storylines from camp, the biggest training camp battles, the players that you should keep your eye on, the most uncertainty surrounding these players so far. And I also want to talk, Shayne, today about the questionable, to say the least, NFL Top 100 player rankings. I don't know what was going through the minds of some of these, obviously voted on by the players. We'll get to that in a second, but there are a couple of Steelers who have made the list so far, and it is nuts. It really is. Excited to talk about that. We're going to touch on the Jauan Jennings trade rumors as well, as the Steelers are one of these teams that seem to be associated with a trade yet again. Don't know if the 49ers are willing to do it yet or not, but you can see where the interest would come from. We'll get to that in a second, but let's start with this, Shayne. TJ Watt's contract extension holdup. We now know the reason. According to NFL insider Adam Schefter, says that these two parties are still far away on reaching terms on a contract extension. And the reason now that we find out is because of the amount of years in the contract. The Steelers want to give a shorter contract, not knowing what the future holds for Watt. Whereas Watt wants the longer deal, the 4, maybe 5-year contract extension with more guaranteed money attached, more money through the first 2-3 seasons of the deal. The Steelers don't tread these waters often. And the last time they did was with TJ Watt's contract in 2021, where they really got deep in the weeds with the guaranteed money. They don't like to give this out to non-quarterbacks. If your name isn't Ben Roethlisberger, historically, really, you haven't gotten it. And so they may have to set a new precedent here. They kind of already did back in 2021. Now, this thing could shake up similarly, Shayne, where it comes down to the wire. Watt comes in, signs before week 1. But right now, it's a little discouraging to note that the two parties are off as far as they are right now. Should the Steelers give in to Watt's demand? Should they give him that 4+ year extension that he's looking for?
I think the issue, if it really is a years thing, they could do the whole, like, it's a 5-year deal, but it's like a 3-year deal actually, and like the last 2 years don't matter unless they do type of thing, because that's how most contracts are now, right? Especially for teams that like know how to manipulate the salary cap. Look what the Eagles are doing. It's like all the money is in 2030 when the cap's going to be twice as big, and they could just either eat the cap hit or they could cut them or whatever. Like they literally just don't care. Like, oh, you want some money? Here's some money. We really don't care right now. That's the type of thing you could do with a deal like this. And then you make those 2 or 3 years true, like guaranteed, maybe not fully guaranteed, but mostly guaranteed seasons. And I think that's fine if you do it that way. But I think what they are thinking, like you said, Tommy, is that they want probably a 3-year deal where 2 years you're mostly guaranteed. But that 3rd year, you could kind of just do whatever you want with it. It can be a bridge to another small extension. It could be where they cut ties if he's no longer the player that he is right now. That's what I think the team wants. And clearly TJ wants a little bit more security than that. And understandably so. I mean, this is a guy that deserves that ultimately if you're a fan of him and you've seen what he's done. But from the team angle, it is hard to do that for a player that's on the wrong side of 30 and already had a not so great end to last year, right? Like that's kind of the issue here. So.
Yeah. And Shayne, you can understand where both parties are coming from here. Obviously, Watt wants that last enormous payday. It's probably assuming that this is going to be the last one he gets. It's going to carry him to his mid to late 30s if he can stick it through the whole deal. But even if he doesn't, more years comes with the more guarantees attached. And if we look at Myles Garrett's contract figures, which is the one that everybody should be comparing it to, it's what his agent's going to compare it to, $88.8 million just in guarantees for Garrett. And that's because he was able to get the 4-year extension. Obviously, if the Steelers only extended him 3 years, we're not looking at nearly as much guaranteed money. That's why Watt wants that extra year on there. Now, what does it mean for the Steelers? I've got Garrett's contract figures pulled up here. And keep in mind now, Garrett's a little bit younger than Watts, even though they came in the draft at the same time. He's a year younger. And the absolute soonest that the Cleveland Browns could get out of Garrett's deal, assuming they wanted to, and they probably won't because he's Myles Garrett, he's a freak. But the soonest they can get out of his deal is the 2028 offseason, in which they would still eat $13.6 million of dead cap space. If they tried to get out of it the year before, let's say Garrett blows his knee out, he somehow loses all of his juice, whatever. He's not the same player. He's disgruntled. He's refusing to show up, whatever the case may be. They would have $56 million of dead cap hit if they tried to get out of the deal during the 2027 offseason. And so you can see where the holdup is, especially knowing that Watt went quiet down the stretch. I'll be the first to admit that. Last 5 or 6 games of the season, he was real quiet. And I know that he drew attention in terms of being the highest shipped player in the NFL. But if the trajectory continues to go down for Watt, now we're looking like 2026, 27. It's like, all right, we are not getting a fraction of our money's worth. We got to kind of move on at this point. You can't do it. If the Steelers sign a 4-year extension for Watt, the earliest they'll be able to, because it's, again, the contract structure is going to be similar to Myles Garrett's. The earliest they would be able to get out of that deal without losing a fortune would be 2028. And by that point, Watt would be heading into age 34 season. So we may not see the same player. We've seen other players, other really good players in his caliber, the the Khalil Macks of the world. At this age, like you're not a $40 million player anymore. Von Miller, you're not a $40 million player. So as good as those guys were, and those are Hall of Fame resumes, by the way, like you have to question if this is in the best financial interest of the team. And that's why the Steelers are pressing hard for 3 years. So it's one fewer year of those guarantees they can get out of if they need to.
Yeah. And I think the ideal contract at this point, in terms of like what's both like reasonable for what Watt would maybe want and reasonable for the team, is like a 3-year, $121.5 million deal. You get that extra little bump ahead of the $40 million that Garrett gets. You get 3 years, 2 of them pretty much fully guaranteed, I would guess, in that situation where you're getting about $80 million in guarantees over those 3 years. But you do have that 3rd year that isn't going to be a huge problem if Watt isn't the same player. If you want to either cut him potentially, which would be obviously kind of the worst case scenario, but maybe even extend him on a less money deal once he realizes, well, I'm not the player I was anymore. I can't really justify it anymore. Whatever that ends up looking like, that's possible with a 3-year deal. You start getting 4 or 5 years, like you said, and those guarantees stretch beyond that 2nd year. That's when it can get really dicey, where you might have to just have a guy in your roster that isn't really holding up that $40 million price tag, despite what he's done in the past. And I think fans realize this. I think even the team probably realizes this. Whatever deal they sign him to, because we assume it's going to happen, it's just what it's going to look like, it is going to be paying for past production, most likely, to some degree. Like, we're probably not getting the defensive player of the year, TJ Watt, most likely anymore. Now, I hope to be wrong about that, but that's just not as likely when you're getting into your 30s to do that at the edge rusher position. So no matter what, it's probably going to be a little bit more money than he's worth, but that's what happens when you have a player of his caliber that needs a contract. You end up doing that a lot of the time. So
yeah, and the whispers is that Aiden Hutchinson is next. And so can you imagine, Shayne, if Hutchinson and Micah Parsons got their deals before Watt? Here's my prediction right now, and I don't know if that's going to happen, but I'm going to say that they can't come to terms. I think it's going to be so far gone because they're already far apart in contract talks. I think it's going to get done. I really do.
Yeah, at some point.
But if it were to happen that Hutchinson and Parsons get paid, and now we're talking $45-46 million for a guy that's going to be in his mid-30s.
Yeah.
I don't think it gets done at that point. I really don't. I would certainly question whether it would. Now, every team has to spend an X amount of cash in the 3-year period. And so it's like, why not spend it on Watt? But you could, I guess, theoretically turn around and spend that money on a much younger free agent in 2026. There's things you can do that. You can offer extensions to players on the team. I want Watt to retire as Steeler. I want him to be here just like everybody else. But there is a legitimate conversation if you are going to overpay for past production. I think that you're almost certain to do so. And I just hope that it's not like Ben Roethlisberger's last deal where he signed that extension very late in his career. And it was at like $38.5 million, which at the time was really high for quarterbacks, like 2nd or 3rd in the league.
Yeah, still high.
And the Steelers did not get their money's worth out of that deal, even a little bit. So hopefully it goes better than that, obviously. All right, so that's where we are with TJ Watt right now. Let's move on. I want to talk about Jauan Jennings and the NFL trade rumors circling the 49ers receiver. if you're not very familiar with Jauan Jennings, he is coming off a career year last year. Hasn't played that long in the NFL. He got a late start because he was a 24-year-old, I think, coming in. And so I think he's already 28 years old, but he had nearly 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns last season, was very efficient, like 8.5 yards a target, high passer rating when targeted. He's a very willing blocker, extremely physical football player, not a top-end speed guy. Some around the league have actually comped him to Hines Ward a little bit just because of his play style and his physicality. And so Steelers fans would certainly love that. He has come out and said that he either wants a deal or he wants to be traded. And you can understand where he's coming from. He just gave the 49ers an excellent season, and he's getting paid pennies on the dollar compared to what wide receivers are going for these days. I think he's set to earn $7.5 million, and he's grossly outplayed that in terms of what he offered last year. He's going to be looking for something much higher. And so can the Steelers, Shayne, first afford to do that? And should they be willing to sacrifice future draft capital to bring in another quality? And I would say this would get you at least a legitimate wide receiver 2 for your offense for this year and potentially for the future. Although we know the Aaron Rodgers window is only going to last a year. Like, is that something worth exploring if the 49ers were willing to budge?
I do think the price tag is ultimately the biggest factor here, because as a player, what he did last year, I think it would be hard for him to replicate that elsewhere. I will say that. I think that Jauan Jennings is one of those players that truly is not so much a product of the system, but more so an example of what the system can do for players like him, right? And that goes back to the Shanahan scheme. You look at Sean McVay's scheme, like guys like this, receivers that are that big body, possession, blocker types, they perform really well in these offenses typically because they're a weapon in the run game, because they can help you basically be in like 11.5 personnel is what I've heard it termed as. I like that, where like you think of the Cooper Kupp Rams, right? Whenever he was at his peak, he was a weapon as a blocker just as much as he was a receiver. Like when he didn't have the ball in his hands, he was still just as threatening to the defense, because you could basically run like power at him and he would just knock out the slot corner. He had no shot ever of blocking or of getting around him. So a player like that makes a lot of sense for our scheme as well with Arthur Smith, then, 1. And 2, he is a player that's ascending still at this point. I mean, he's 28, like you said, I'm pretty sure as well. He was a converted quarterback from Tennessee. Like, he played a lot there and then ended up becoming a receiver there. I think he would be a good fit to be this team's receiver too, because of the fact we don't have anyone like him on the roster. I mean, we basically have like a discount version with Spencer Gronick, but he's not going to be an offensive player this month, I don't think. So like, if you want that role, and I'm sure Arthur Smith would want it, it could be worth it. But again, what's the draft capital? And then what money does he want? Like, what is it going to cost you to actually extend him? Because I do think whatever you give up for him, you're going to want to extend him for at least a couple of years to get the most value out of that you can. So,
yeah, Shayne, and I think that the Steelers have done a good job when it comes to giving themselves a shot to compete now while not jeopardizing their future draft capital. And they're set to have like 12 picks next year, including 2/3, 2/4, 2/5. Like, they lost a lot of players. They were wise with their budgeting and free agency. They signed players who were cut, so they did not impact the compensatory formula, like Darius Slay, like Aaron Rodgers. So for that reason, I think they need to maximize this window. If they're going to do it, they need to maximize the window. But at the same time, it's like, I'm not a firm believer in what they've got going for them right now. And so I don't want to give up all your future assets. Now, from the 49ers perspective, it's like, is this worth it for them? Like, they are a team that, even with their down year though, Shayne, it's like they could theoretically jump right back. They had a lot of injuries. They could jump back and be a competitive team. They've already lost Deebo Samuel, who was on the downward trend there. They paid $30 million per year to Brandon Ayuk, but it's like, do you really want to put that much on Ricky Pearsall's shoulders 11 months after being shot or whatever last year? And so now you got Demarcus Robinson, you've got Jacob Cohen, like, you have some options there. But if this is the guy that's coming off that breakout season, why get rid of them? Why move on from Jauan Jennings if you think that you can compete for a Super Bowl?
That's the issue, is from the 49ers perspective, are they confident that the receivers down the depth chart can provide anything close to what Jennings does? And I think from a raw production standpoint, because it's the Niners offense, probably, like, just from a receiving output, they don't have anyone who can replicate what he does for them in the run game, and also specifically the way that he wins as a receiver. They don't have that elsewhere on the roster, at least not anyone who's established, right? So that's kind of the bigger question here is the Steelers should look into this if it's going to be something that's not super costly, because again, they do have picks. You want to keep those picks for possible moving up and down the board in the draft, but realistically, is one of your fourth round compensatory picks going to be the difference between you getting to where you want to get a quarterback? Probably not, right? Like, I think that's probably the case. So you could afford to do something like that. The Niners, though, are the side that I'm not really sure they can afford to do that unless they are kind of telling themselves like, and maybe this year's not going to be our year either. We need to kind of assess what we have on the roster. We know what we have in Jennings, but is he going to be enough of a difference maker long term? That's probably what they have to discuss internally when he's making this request.
Well, and it's 2 years ago, Shayne. They were so good. And I don't think that they're willing to give up on that yet. And
Probably
so
not.
there are whispers out there that the 49ers are shutting it down like cold turkey, saying we're not going to do this. I don't know if there's truth to that or not, but we'll see. We got a comment here, Derpy Entertainment. I'd rather have Scary Terry McLaurin. Do not disagree with you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
But the problem is Steelers are not going to pay $60+ million for their top two receivers. They just won't do it. They're a defensive-minded team. Even if we think they should buck that trend and start paying offensive players, not going to happen. Now, what I will argue here, and I've actually written this recently in an article, hindsight, knowing what we knew with the whole DK Metcalf situation, if the Commanders were willing to trade McLaurin, I'd rather have McLaurin than Metcalf.
Oh,
I think
sure.
that he is
a
better, more well-rounded player. He can create separation. He's a true number one receiver, where Metcalf is closer to the one-trick pony, where he's a downfield receiver, box you out. Like, McLaurin is a better player. And so I'd rather have him over Metcalf, let alone Jauan Jennings. But agree with you there for sure. Just not going to happen. The Steelers aren't going to invest that much in the receiver, even though it would certainly offer a boost to their offense. All right. Anything else, Shayne, on this this Jauan Jennings trade rumor before we move on?
Again, more so just curious if the Niners even entertain it that much. Like, I think they would rather just extend him, realistically. I just wonder if they hadn't gone to him about doing it, and that's why he's doing this, where he wants to kind of force the issue, which that's one of the few things you can do as a player, is to force the issue. So that might just be what happens ultimately.
Yeah, and there's so much leveraging that goes on all the time with coming out. Where have we seen this before? A player comes out and says, I want to be traded if I'm not going to get a contract. Well, guess what happens a week later? You get a contract. And so, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that again. It's a very common strategy by these agents out there. So we'll see where they go from there, and maybe they'll get something done here soon. Shayne, we threw this in the notes because I almost missed it, and I need to talk about this.
Yeah.
But if you haven't heard, Shamar Stewart and the whole fiasco going on in Cincinnati with their first round pick, it's just hard to believe. So the Bengals are trying to cut corners like they always do financially. They don't like to spend. They don't like to give out fully guaranteed contracts. Even if it's the rest of what the NFL is doing, you have to follow suit. Like, of course, Shamar Stewart is going to complain if he's not getting what he thinks is fair compared to his NFL peers who were first round picks. He wants the guaranteed contract. Bengals are giving it to him. And so he's back at Texas A&M practicing with his players, prepared to sit out of Bengals training camp. Now, just so you know how this works, this was the 17th overall pick in the first round of the 2025 NFL draft. This is a guy the Bengals were counting on to be part of their defense, and he still might be. He cannot go back to play at Texas A&M or any other college team. He declared for the draft. But what can happen would just be beyond bizarre, Shayne. He can sit out the entire season and go back into the 2026 NFL draft. And I play this out in my mind like it's the chances of this happening are so slim, but how hilarious would it be if he went back into the draft and got drafted by like another AFC North rival and he goes and plays against the Bengals, and the Bengals burnt their first round pick and never got to use him? Like, we're entering some weird territory here. So I thought we would definitely talk about that, because the Bengals just don't know how to do financial business. They're doing the same with Trey Hendrickson, and they're two-time sack leaders, 2 consecutive seasons, 2023 and 2024. They're not appeasing their players at all. And I've said countless times, I feel so bad for Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, like bona fide, like legitimate superstar players who are at the mercy of a crappy organization.
Yeah, and I did an article on stillcurtain.com about this situation. If you guys want to check that out, it goes into more detail about like specifically what's going on with them. But the thing that shocks me with this whole ordeal is that they chose this year in a year where they desperately need defense to their defense just to kind of get to a manageable level. Like they don't need them to be stars. You saw what this team did last year, almost making the playoffs with one of the worst defenses in the sport. They have T. Higgins and Jamar Chase now locked down, so that you have that trio on offense. The offensive line is still what it is, but it's not probably going to be worse. It's just going to still probably be bad. But where they can improve, where they can hopefully find some more wins, is with the defense. So you use the 17th overall pick on an admittedly raw edge rusher, by the way, which is a whole other thing. But you hope that you can get something out of him probably as early as this year, especially because you don't know what's going on with Trey Hendrickson because you refuse to pay him also. And now you're like, oh, by the way, we're going to put a clause in the contract that we didn't do our last 2 first-round picks, saying like, oh, if you get in any trouble, we can just like void your guarantees. What is the point of this?
Yeah.
Like, what are you ultimately trying to accomplish as an organization? Because you haven't done this before. And then you decide this season, when you're essentially going all in, you paid all the money to the receivers, you have them locked down. Now you're going to play hardball with your 17th overall pick that you hope is going to be part of why your defense turns around. This is the type of stuff where like anyone else could do this except for the Bengals, basically. Like if you put anyone else in this position, they'd be like, oh yeah, I'm not going to do that. Why would I do that? That doesn't make any sense. But they do it consistently. And this also happened, by the way, with Jesse Bates. There's the safety that is now a star player for the Falcons, maybe the best safety in the sport, depending on who you ask, especially deep safety. They could have paid him. They absolutely could have. They decided, oh, we don't need him. Like we'll just do something else. Look what he's gone on to do, and I bet you they would love to have him right now with the way their safety play has been. This is why, despite them hitting on the quarterback, hitting on the receivers, they are still a franchise that outside of that magical Super Bowl run has accomplished very little in their history, despite having multiple opportunities to do so.
And Shayne, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here, but you had mentioned this, and I just want to talk about it real quick. The Bengals took not just one of the rawest players we've seen this year, one of the rawest first-round picks we've seen in a decade in the NFL. Like this guy he's a 100th percentile athlete, according to
his ridiculous athlete. Yeah.
So yeah, it's like Mario Williams type stuff.
Yeah.
But the production in college in the game, like his pass rush game plan was so bad. He had 4.5 sacks and 12 tackles for loss in 37 games. That's a terrible, terrible ratio. The guy needs as many reps as he can get. And the fact that he's not participating, this is the last first-round pick in the NFL this year that you don't want participating in camp. Like he needs every little bit of repetition he can get there. So the whole thing is just it's a nightmare situation for a team that already had a pitiful defense, and it might only get worse, Shayne. Like this defense could legitimately get worse than it was last year, and the offense is going to have to go and score 35, 40 points a game to keep it competitive.
Just think about this too, because Trey Hendrickson, again, currently under contract, has not been involved in the organization since the offseason started, and he has reason not to because he's getting paid like less than half of what he probably should be getting paid. And instead of being like, you know what, we should at least make sure the one key defensive player we currently have is happy to some degree, even if it's a short deal or something just to sweeten the pot. They're like, no, we'll just say to the media that like, oh yeah, you're being unreasonable and we don't want to. Like they don't want to win. That's the only excuse that you could say. The only thing you could say about them is that they just don't want to win football games. And of course they would say that's not true. But like then you need to do something about that because you're not winning football games, especially early in the season when the offense doesn't hit as good early on. The defense needs to be the one to step up. They don't do it, and they haven't for several years. So I don't know with that.
Yeah, you can't go like off script and try to do what the rest of the NFL is not doing. Like
this is not a zig when they zag situation.
Yeah,
this is not how you. This is not how to do that if you're going to do that.
Not at all.
So
we got another comment here. Backing up for a minute, I'd rather just sign Amari Cooper and Gabe Davis, the free agent wide receivers. Yeah, I think they're cooked. That's the problem.
That's
I think they're cooked. Like at one point, I would have loved to have both of these guys. Gabe Davis can't pass a physical now. He's coming off a wretched season, although it was plagued with injuries. And Amari Cooper's just old. He doesn't have the same juice, doesn't offer what he used to in Cleveland, let alone his Dallas days or the Raiders. Like he's been around a long time. He's a 33, 34-year-old receiver. So I just don't know if he's got anything left in the tank. But I agree, the price is right there. At least you don't have to give up draft capital for those guys. You go, bring them in, see what happens. I just don't think there's much left. So with that being said, Shayne, I want to get into our first big discussion topic. We are going to talk Steelers training camp at the end of today's show, so make sure you stick around for that. But right now, Shayne, I want to talk about this egregious NFL top 100 players list voted on by the players for 2025. It's bad. I'm sorry. It's really bad. And I think that what this shows, it's one thing like what Jeremy Fowler and ESPN's doing with the 70 coaches, executive scouts. If you want to ask them, the guys that are watching all these players and prepping for them, whatever, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But I think we're getting to the point now where it's like, all right, we have eyes, right? we can watch these games. We watch more. I guarantee we watch more than some of these players do when it comes to watching other teams, teams that they are not, that are not on their schedule.
Right.
And yet these are the players they're interviewing saying, oh, well, this player had a great season when they actually did not. And so the first big point that I wanted to make here, Shayne, and this came out today as we're recording this, Patrick Queen. I never thought we would be talking about him as one of the top 100 players in the NFL, because he's not.
Yeah.
But he made the list at number 75. That, Shayne, just so everybody's aware, that beats out players like Vita Vea, T. Higgins, Khalil Mack, Dak Prescott, Rashawn Gary, and many others, Quinnen Williams, guys who are all pros, like guys that are deserving of this list. Patrick Queen, yes, he technically made his second consecutive Pro Bowl, which we know is a popularity contest at this point. Shayne, he was not the best linebacker on the team. I'm going to flat out say he was not. He might have been the third best off-ball linebacker on the team. Landon Roberts was an elite run defender, even if he was a liability in coverage. They didn't use him much there. Peyton Wilson, as a rookie, was better on a per-snap basis than what Patrick Queen was. What are we thinking here with this ranking?
So there's the old adage that, players don't always make the best scouts, right? You look at like the most famous example in recent times has been like Michael Jordan as an executive or was like part owner or whatever with the Bobcats before they became the whole, like it's the whole idea of like players sometimes are really good at playing the game, but they're not always great at telling you how good other players are at playing the game. Or more importantly, I think nowadays, especially the NFL top 100 list when it's first started, I think was generally a better list, usually a better indication of the best players. But I think, frankly, more and more players are not really that big of football fans. It feels like kind of in a lot of ways where like they don't pay attention all the time to what's going on in the league. They don't watch a lot of football outside of their game tape and film studies. And I think ultimately that's fine. Like that, if you're a good player, you don't necessarily have to be a great fan of the game. But when you put together a list of players voting on who the best players are, sometimes you're going to get stuff like this. Where like, again, is Patrick Queen flashy at times? Does he make some splash plays? Is he sometimes a effective player? Absolutely. He doesn't come anywhere close to the top 100 players in the NFL right now. He isn't. He wasn't last year. I'd even argue the year before he was closer, but still probably wasn't one because, again, a lot of that can be attributed to playing next to Roquan Smith. I simply just don't understand where this ranking comes from, because it's not even one of those things where it's like, oh, well, he had a great year the year before and he followed it up with it. It's like, no, he regressed from the previous year. So you'd think he would just not be on the list. And not only that, we'll talk about in a second, he's above, who was honestly, depending on how you feel about TJ's end of season run, was probably the best player on the team last year. He's above him in this ranking, and we'll talk about him in a minute. That just is asinine to me. It just is. I just simply don't understand it.
There's so much I want to say about this. And again, we are Steelers fans. We're trying to be.
I want Patrick Queen to be the 75th best player.
I want to. If this was, yes, if this is truly how it was, sign me up. But
sure,
he's not. I mean,
just isn't right now.
Couple of things here, and I just want to show you how off base this is. First of all, when we watch the film, right? When we watch the broadcast view, I would describe Patrick Queen's play as up and down with more down than up, right? So he had a couple really good games. His breakout game, that one signature game from the 2024 season was against the Ravens. He wanted to stick it to him. He had that chip on his shoulder.
He had a good game.
He was excellent then. Yeah. But a lot of it was very, very wishy-washy, average linebacker play at best. And so it's when I watch it on the broadcast view, and then I go back on Monday morning and I watch Monday afternoon, watch the all 22 film, I can see that, all right, yeah, there's a lot of misses here. There's a lot of questionable angles, a lot of just not high quality play, I would say. So then we go and look at the advanced statistics. He gave up 114 passer rating, over 500 yards, 4 passing touchdowns. He was an absolute liability in pass coverage last year, which has kind of been the story of his career. He's a much better downhill run and chase guy than he is a guy in coverage. I thought he did a good job blitzing, but you can look at his PFF grade of 56.8 last year that ranks 65th among linebackers. You can look
he's
at
almost that low. He barely cracks the top 75 linebackers.
I
want to specify just his position, of which there are not that many.
And there's like 81 qualifying players, I think, at the position. So it was not good. It wasn't. And in comparison, by the way, Peyton Wilson ranked as the 17th best linebacker, Orlando Roberts as the 8th best linebacker last year. I think objectively they were better players because they were more consistent. Peyton Wilson made more splash plays and turnover worthy plays in less than half the snaps that Patrick Queen got last year. And he was much better in coverage. He allowed a 79 pass rating. He had a one-handed interception 40 yards down the field and trail coverage. Like, there's no contest here that he wasn't the best linebacker on his own team. Now, he's the highest paid. He played the most snaps. He had the most raw production. And I say raw production because that's the only thing he had the most of, is the most tackles, essentially. He had 1 sack, 6 tackles for a loss, but 6 tackles for a loss on 1,090 defensive snaps is a poor ratio for a guy that's playing as much as he is. There was no interceptions. There was 7 passes defended on 76 targets, I believe. Like, it just wasn't a good season. And so to rank him inside the top 75 players over some of the names I mentioned is egregious. It's poor. It's a bad choice. It's just flat out bad choice. That doesn't even mention the guys ranked 81 through 100. And by the way, as we're recording this, we only are up to player 75 right now. They're still releasing these rankings. Eventually, we're going to get to see if there's any other Steelers that made this list. I think there's going to be at least 1, maybe 2 left on here. We'll talk about that in a second, who they are. But Shayne, now I got to transition this from Patrick Queen into a player who is so vividly better than him on the very same team, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Patrick Queen ranked 75. Cameron Hayward, 4-time All-Pro Cameron Hayward, first-team All-Pro last year, ranked 83rd. He doesn't even beat out Patrick Queen, a questionable off-ball linebacker. How does this happen? Like, Cam Hayward was so good as a run defender, taking on double-team blocks last year. He was disruptive in the backfield. I just don't know how. I don't know how you can possibly come to the conclusion that Queen was better in respect to his position than Cam Hayward was.
Yeah. When I saw that Queen, like, first of all, I saw the 83rd ranking for Cam when it came out a while ago. That was just like, I'm like, all right, guys, like, what are we? Because again, this list is supposed to be, as far as I understand, who were the 100 best players last season as we head into this season. So it's not looking forward. It's not assuming anything about 2025. It's who were the 100 best players in the NFL during the past season. If that's how this list is supposed to be set up, I don't really know how you get to Hayward at 83. Where exactly you should put him, I don't really know. I'd have to think about it for a lot longer than I have. I've not given this a ton of time because I think it's kind of worth not doing that, right? It's not really worth it. However, it's certainly not 83. It's got to be in the top half of the players in the league and probably relatively high inside that top half of the players. And even if you were projecting forward, what has Patrick Queen done to make you think he's going to be better than Cam Hayward next year? Like, I think Cam Hayward could regress significantly and still be a better player than him. So I just simply don't really know. Both of these rankings make about the same amount of sense is basically what I'm saying. That's kind of sad considering the type of players we're talking about here.
Man, it's just it's funny to think about. And I go give you another example here. Player 97 on the list, so significantly lower, was Drake London, who had a 100 catch, 1,300 yard, 9 touchdown.
Very good player, deserving
season. It's not making sense. It's not computing here, Shayne. So anyway, take it for what you will. And any of you who want to be like come down super hard on like PFF or whatever, their rankings, player rankings, are far closer to accurate than what we're seeing with the NFL top 100. So we'll see how this thing unfolds. And the last thing I want to say about the NFL Top 100, Shayne, is let's predict who else is going to make this list. And I was going to say predict where they're going to rank, but this is so just unpredictable. So, I mean, TJ Watt's one of them, right? Yes. For sure, he's going to make the list somewhere. It's always been really high. Like, he's always been a top 10 player on this list. I don't know if he gets there this time.
Probably not. I don't think so.
Again, there's some variables here. I think that he probably ranks in like the 11 to 15-ish range, if I had to guess, based on what he did last season. Do you see anybody else making this list? Steelers that aren't mentioned yet?
I mean, I think Metcalf could make it because he has a reputation, although I would also say he shouldn't probably.
Yeah.
I think it's too early, but I think Zach Frazier deserves recognition.
Okay.
Because there's so few great centers in the league now. You know, I don't know how many are going to, but we already saw Creed Humphrey come off the board, so he's not going to be on there. Right. Like that's also Creed Humphrey should not be off the board already. That's a whole other thing.
No. I think he's 93. So,
yeah. It's like, sorry, dude, no, that's just not whatever. But again, like this is the way that list is. So Frazier won't be on it. I think Highsmith deserves to be on it potentially. Now he missed some time last year, but his overall like numbers on a per game basis were about as good as anyone's, honestly, at the edge rusher position last year in a lot of ways. So like I think he definitely deserves to be on there somewhere, probably closer to the range that's already been revealed, but still on there potentially. And that's probably it right now. I mean, I would say Minka shouldn't have been on it. I'm assuming he will be probably just because of his reputation too. But he's obviously now on the Dolphins anyway, so it doesn't matter. And Ramsey will probably have a chance to be on it, I'm guessing, because of his reputation. But I don't know. It's kind of hard to say at this point.
Yeah, Shayne, just to come back on some of what you said there, I think because Highsmith was not in the top from the 75 to 100 range, I don't think he makes it. There's just too many edge rushers.
Well, I don't think so.
Have to be. I think that Watt's the only one left. I really do. Probably. I think the Steelers have 3 this year, and it's Watts, Patrick Queen, and Cam Hayward. So, but I do agree with Zach Frazier 100%. Like Frazier was one of the best centers in the league last year as a rookie, and he's deserving of making the list, certainly more so than the player we've just been talking about here for the last 10 minutes. So that's all we've got to say about that. If you are a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers and would like to support the Steel Curtain Podcast, please consider subscribing to the Steel Curtain Podcast on YouTube. We appreciate all of your support. All right, Shayne, let's talk Steelers training camp preview, because by this time next week, let's see, what is next one? Oh, yeah, Steelers are going to be reporting to camp, and we'll have lots to talk about. So we want to give you the starter pack here, if you will, and help you get prepared for training camp. Go over the roster, some of the biggest players to watch, biggest battles to watch this year. And let's start right at the top of the list, Shayne, with the quarterback position. Obviously, we know how this is going to shake out, right? It's going to be Aaron Rodgers, your number 1. Mason Rudolph is paid to be that number 2. Will Howard, I'm assuming, is going to earn that number 3 role, though you could say there's a battle right now between Skylar Thompson and Will Howard. I doubt if the Steelers would consider making it a battle between Mason Rudolph and Will Howard, at least not right at the gate. Maybe that happens mid-season or so. But they're going to go with the 30-year-old that they trust if something were to happen to Aaron Rodgers. They're not just going to deploy a 6th-round rookie out there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Will Howard has the leg up on Skylar Thompson because he's just better, honestly. I know he lost a quarterback competition to him in college, which is a very funny anecdote. So I wonder how those two will interact. But I do think he's just a better NFL prospect. I think he's a better NFL type player. So I don't expect that to really go any other way than Will Howard getting that 3rd spot. And then he'll probably, again, be the inactive then on game days where Mason will be the backup. Now, I do think it's possible that if Mason is just not good in camp and practice throughout the season, that we may see that switch eventually, and get him more of an opportunity with Will Howard to be a backup long term. I think that's kind of the goal when you take him in the 6th round, is for him to be a primary backup for at least his rookie contract, and then we'll see from there. But for now, I think quarterback is relatively kind of where it is. I'm going to stay that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a quarterback. People like to get excited about it. I wasn't the biggest Will Howard fan because of the total arm package that you're getting with him.
The 6th round, that's why I'm like, it's fine with it.
Yeah. I mean, I see it shaking out where he's going to be the QB3. And like you said, maybe there'll be a little bit of competition down the stretch there. The biggest thing to watch, though, Shayne, at this position, and I think that quite frankly, we've already seen it during OTA's minicamp of the very few clips that were shown. Aaron Rodgers easily has the best arm in this group, despite being 41 years old. Like, that was never Mason Rudolph's forte. No. It's certainly not Will Howard's. It's definitely not Skylar Thompson's, who has a real hard time driving that football. That's not where he's strong. Aaron Rodgers, age and all, easily has the best arm in the group. I think that will show up at camp if you guys make it down to Latrobe this year. Keep an eye on that. It would be interesting to see, how does Howard's velocity look in comparison to Rudolph, in comparison to Skylar Thompson? Is it the second best on the team? Because I think that the competition starts at second best. Rodgers has first best arm talent wrapped up.
I totally agree. I think it probably is Howard at this point. Mason's arm has never been particularly good. I think he's always been a good deep ball thrower in terms of just the trajectory and how he can place the ball. We saw that in his little stint as a starter for us last time he was. But in general, I think in terms of being able to push the ball, Howard is nothing special, but I think he's closer to being like a solid player in that regard than the other two that are in contention for that. So,
all right, let's move on to running back here, Shayne, and this should be an interesting one. No Najee Harris this year. By the way, hope Najee's okay with the whole firework incident. We don't know how much clarity we've gotten since then, but it sounds like he's going to be all right. So
yeah, it seems like it was just superficial. Like they said, it was just kind of like probably, if I had to guess, something either right below or right above the eye that didn't actually affect the eye itself, or else he would be in more dire straits. But it sounds like he'll be fine from what they said.
And so he's got his battle cut out for him with Omari and Hampton over there in LA. But in Pittsburgh, we got Jaylen Warren, we got Caleb Johnson. This should be fun because they're two very different running backs. Johnson is that kind of that third, or excuse me, Warren's like the third down back, if you will, can pass, protect, catch, run out of the backfield, all that kind of stuff. More the choppy step guy. Johnson is the long strider, the run away from you in space, break arm tackles, pure wide zone runner. Like, I like the dynamic of having the two because they are so different. I think how I see this shaping up, Shayne, is let me know if you think differently. I think that they start Jaylen Warren as a starter to begin the season. I think that Johnson, though, gets a pretty heavy share right away, 40-45% of the total touches from the backfield. And that eventually shifts into his favor by the second half of the season. Now, the rest of the running back room, Steelers typically only keep 3. That appears that it's going to be Kenneth Gainwell, although what in the world's going on with Cordell Patterson, like still hanging around? Like, I don't know what's happening there. But I would assume that would be Gainwell. Do you see the running back competition shaping out differently than that?
I think what they're going to do is what you said initially, where they're going to give Jaylen every opportunity to be the primary back to start the season. They always lean towards veterans for the most part. That sometimes is different. We'll actually talk about it in a little bit, that there's one newcomer that seems to already kind of have a role settled, which is interesting. So we'll talk about that. But I think even at running back, I think they know Jaylen. They know what he's capable of. He's been a very good player for them so far in his career. So he's going to get the leg up to start things. But I think the goal, probably for the team and for just what you want as a fan, is that we get closer to the Najee-Jaylen split as the season goes along, where Caleb is the primary runner. Warren handles more of the passing down stuff and is more of a change of pace. That's, I think, the best version of this backfield. And then you could throw Kenneth Gainwell out there in third down situations as well. He's been very good at that. With the Eagles, he'll be the returner. And beyond that, like you said, if they do keep a fourth running back, which is not common for this team, but there is some interesting names in that group. You have Cordell Patterson, obviously, who I kind of think he's just going to end up being cut, maybe signed by someone, but might just be the end for him. Trey Sermon they brought in, who's had his moments at times. Evan Hall was actually a guy I liked a lot out of Northwestern a couple years ago. And then that's kind of the group that has a chance, I think, to at least compete. But it's most likely Gainwell in that third spot, and then maybe someone sticks to the fourth, but probably not.
100% agree. And obviously the player to keep an eye on here is the rookie. Caleb Johnson should be an exciting player, and we'll see what kind of impact he has early on at camp, because that could certainly play a factor in how much he contributes early on in the season. Let's move on to wide receiver now. Wide receiver 1 is well wrapped up. There is no contest here. George Pickens is gone. It is DK Metcalf with flying colors. It will be astounding if he doesn't lead this team in targets this year, assuming that he plays at least 14, 15 games. He's going to do it. The question then becomes, all right, who is next? And you listen to Zach Azzani and you listen to the coaching staff. That very much appears that Calvin Austin III is in the driver's seat to be the wide receiver 2 to open up the season. The Steelers also have 33-year-old Robert Woods, who has had a productive career but hasn't done much over the past few seasons. Roman Wilson, who played 5 snaps as a rookie. He was injured on the first padded practice of training camp, suffered a high ankle sprain, and then came back in, suffered a hamstring injury. So basically redshirted that year. He is the biggest wild card here, and a guy that we would love to see him emerge as like a true wide receiver 2 candidate. I think that's a lot to ask for a guy who was already young and raw and missed his rookie year. Outside of those guys, we've got Scotty Miller coming back. We'll see if he can stick. I think he's going to have a hard time this year. Ben Skoranek will be back for special teams purposes. And then anybody else strike you on this list? We got Montana Lamonius Craig, the big long name guy there.
Rock Taylor. Incredible name.
I just, to me, I know people get excited about some of these bottom of the roster guys, but like, I know definitively they don't have a chance. They don't have a chance at cracking the roster. So I'm more focused on the guys who can contribute in 2025, quite frankly. What do you think is going to happen, particularly with like spots 2 through 5-ish here? How do you think that battle's going to go?
I do think right now I'd be surprised if Austin doesn't start the season as a receiver 2 if they don't add anyone else to this group. He just has the most experience with the team. He has the ability to kind of take the top off the defense a little bit too when you use him in that way. You can use him in the slot and kind of move him around. You hope Roman Wilson ultimately is the second most targeted wide receiver on this roster. Now, how many targets that you need to get to be that, I don't know. And that's kind of why it might not be a huge discrepancy between him and Austin and whoever else. But I think that's what you hope for as a Steelers fan. You hope you get that investment and Roman Wilson figured out this year and he can be a productive player. I think beyond those two, though, you shouldn't expect a whole lot. Robert Woods is more of he's definitely closer to the mold of like the Allen Robinsons and that type of thing that we've done. I think he's just still a better player even potentially than those guys were, but like not more productive probably, especially because he's not going to be the receiver 2, I don't think, regardless. So at least there's that. But there's not a whole lot to look at elsewhere. I mean, again, Scotty Miller probably doesn't make this team. Skoranek, we know what his role is going to be. Yeah, Brandon Johnson had a little bit of success with the Broncos in 2023, I think it was. Like he had a little bit of a blip where he was able to do something, but not really. I mean, he's the only other guy that has like any sort of even maybe production that you could look at in the league. It's pretty dire after those first like 4 guys, especially. So.
Yeah, and if we're looking at this, Shayne, from let's say a Steelers training camp rooting guide, you should not be rooting that Robert Woods looks better than Calvin Austin.
You certainly should not be.
Roman Wilson. You should be hoping that Roman Wilson looks like a star, like because go back to like the consensus board and everything. He was a pretty high profile player. He was one of Chris Sims's top 5 wide receivers. I think he had him above Roma Dunze. And so,
well, that's also Chris Sims doing his thing.
It's Chris Sims. And he's a little hot takey there.
To be fair, but I had him in my top 50 players. So I mean,
I think he was 46 on the consensus board, and Steelers got him.
He's right around the same for me. I liked him a lot.
So the potentials. I mean, the guy ran a sub 4.4. He had a 1.1% college drop rate, which is phenomenal. Insane. Like the guy is so sure-handed. He's got to work on his route running. He's got to show that he can play on the outside. If he can do those things, there's some stuff to get excited about there. And he's very explosive off the line of scrimmage. So keep an eye on that. Obviously, he has potential to be the hope of the future more than the rest of the guys, even Calvin Austin, because this may be his last year in Pittsburgh. If Steelers don't sign him, it could be his last year in Pittsburgh. I think, though, Shayne, that Austin's going to be the wide receiver 2. And I do think that he earns the second most wide receiver targets on the team. And that will lead us into our next discussion of who might actually earn the second and maybe even third most targets overall on the team. This tight end room is all of a sudden very interesting because we've got a Pro Bowl player that was added to the mix, a guy who caught 88 passes for 884 yards and 8 touchdowns last year. 8 was the magic number, apparently, and that is Jonnu Smith. Now, Smith hasn't been an uber productive receiving tight end throughout his career, but he's played H-back. He's done everything. He's blocked in space. He's played in line. I think he was best at that F tight end role. Just get him on slants, let him do some work after the catch. He was very good with Miami last year. So now we add him to a tight end room that already has Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington. It was looking like it was already very clear cut. Like Freiermuth was your F tight end. Darnell was your Y, your inline blocker, serves as like a second offensive tackle or third offensive tackle at times. How does this shake up now, Shayne, knowing that Jonnu Smith is an Arthur Smith guy? He's coming off a better season than Freiermuth. He was more productive than any season Freiermuth had, is coming off of that Pro Bowl year, and the Steelers just gave him a pay bump up to what Freiermuth is making. So I'm interested to see how you think this is going to shape out.
It's one of the most fascinating position groups in the league, in my opinion, like how they go about doing this, because I know it didn't cost a lot, and I know they aren't paying him like an insane amount of money, but they did give him a little bit of a bump. Like they clearly value him. You don't trade for this player if you don't plan on featuring him semi prominently, right? Like, so to me, it comes down to, okay, we know Jonnu's going to be a part of the offense and probably a relatively big part. What does that mean for Freiermuth as a receiving threat? Does that mean his production and his usage is going to come down? Does it mean that his usage is going to be different? How are they going to get them on the field at the same time? And how do you maximize having, at this point, maybe one of the 5 best blocking tight ends in the league on your roster? How do you get him on the field still too? I think it's going to be hard. I think Arthur Smith has a plan in place. I think that's why this trade was ultimately made. I don't think he did it haphazardly. As much as he loves the guy, we know that. I still think he has a plan in place, and I don't think he wants to take the ball out of Pat Freiermuth's hands constantly, because he is one of our best players still on offense. So to me, I think what this comes down to is, can you find a way creatively to get all 3 of these guys on the field without minimizing your options, like without making the defense have an easier time knowing what's coming? That's really, I think, the key to making this work, is can you be multiple enough on your offense where you can get all these guys on the field and still threaten deep, with maybe DK being the one receiver? Can you get them both, especially the 2 receiving threats at tight end, both in ideal positions to make an impact? If you can do that, then this room will make a ton of sense very quickly. If you can't, it's probably going to be meaning one of these guys isn't getting used to the best of their ability.
Yeah, Shane, I almost certainly think that this will cut into Freiermuth's production now.
You assume it has to some degree.
Yeah, I think it has to. He's had 60-plus receptions in 3 of his 4 seasons. The only one he didn't was when he had concussions, the soft tissue injuries, and he missed significant time. I don't think that Freiermuth is a bad player, but I do think that Jonnu's coming off a better season. He's a player that Arthur Smith has known for a very long time, and he just desperately wanted him on this team. It seemed like it shouldn't have been a surprise to anybody to see him wind up in Pittsburgh, but there wasn't much wide receiver to target distribution from last season to cut anyway. You know what I'm saying? Like most of the targets went to George Pickens and Freiermuth. So it's like, who do you cut into? You're cutting into Van Jefferson's production from last year, or Mike Williams, Calvin Austin, maybe a little bit, but I would actually think that his might go up a little bit this year. I think that it's going to have to cut into Freiermuth's production, unfortunately for him. I mean, the fortunate part for him is he already got his payday, which kind of stinks for Pittsburgh. Now, do you pay a tight end $12 million a year to be a backup? Like, I want to see how these roles shape up, and if Freiermuth still out snaps Jonnu Smith, or it's the other way around. I think it's a coin flip. Like, I really think it could go either way here. And then when you talk about the Steelers, if they keep 4 here, the top 3 are very much set in stone, unless the Steelers surprisingly trade Freiermuth or Washington, which I very much doubt. You're looking at those 3 guys: Freiermuth, Washington, Jonnu Smith. Number 4 could be a couple of different players. I don't think that Connor Hayward's job is safe as it was in years past. No. DJ Thomas Jones there, who can give you a little bit of fullback, a little bit of H-back, kind of everything. Shane, I gotta ask this question. We'll ask the questions that nobody else asks, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Will the Steelers show a little bit of nepotism here? If the competition is close between Hayward and tight end 4, like, are they going to appease Cam with this?
Probably. Probably. I think also, if anything, Connor, like, when he's been asked to play, has been fine. Like, I don't think he's a player that you shouldn't necessarily be willing to roster. I just also think, like, it's not a significant enough role for me to care that much anyway. The 4th tight end in this team, good luck getting on the field.
Yeah. And
you know what I mean? So,
yeah, honestly, I like Hayward. I think he's a smart player. He's got good hands. He knows his assignment. Like, he was maxed out the day he stepped off on the field. Like, when you're 5'11" and change and 235 pounds or whatever, and you're a tight end, you're not a tight end, really.
You're
You're a
not. You're
special
just
teams player, and
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what he's going to do again, I would assume. So my prediction is he'll still be here at least this season. But you never know. We could see a newcomer take that tight end 4 spot there. Let's move on to talk about the offensive line and kind of a new look unit a little bit this year. Broderick's going to go back to left tackle. We'll get to see the actual first big sample of Troy Fautano. Obviously, he played during camp last year, but then it was injured after week 1 of the season. So I'm interested to see how that looks in camp there. In terms of the backups here, this is where it gets scary. Like, your depth option is nowhere near as good as it was last year. When you think about last year during entering camp, Shayne, specifically the interior offensive line, the Steelers had backups like Mason McCormick, like Nate Herbig, like Ryan McCollum. They had Broderick Jones was going to be a backup starting the year last year. And so now they have no tackle. Like, if Calvin Anderson has to come in, they're going to be hurting here. If anybody from the interior offensive line has to come in, they're going to be hurting. They don't have that same depth this year. Do you think you see any surprise players emerge from this group?
I mean, it's hard to say that that's going to be the case. I mean, Dylan Cook has been a guy that's been around the team for a while, but I don't know if I'm any more confident in him than Calvin Anderson. You have a rookie out of Lindenwood, Gareth Warren. You know, maybe somehow strike gold with another Warren as an undrafted free agent. I don't know. Probably not. Maybe you hope that Spencer Anderson can play tackle now again or something. Like, I don't know. Like, it's kind of rough, man. It's rough.
It is. And Shayne, I really think the Steelers are entering that territory that if they get an injury to a starter in camp, they 100% are going to go out and sign a veteran who can come in, and because you can't trust what the depth that they have. And I think that might be the most concerning part on the team. Quite honestly, is you are one yes, you are one injury away from a scary situation on the offensive line already. And you never like that to begin with. We won't spend much time on that. Let's move over to the defensive line, where there are more players to talk about that we have not seen in action yet. Most notably, Derek Harmon, obviously the Steelers' first-round pick, who I'm very excited to see this year. Also, Y.A. Black, who is their 5th-round selection. We're going to see shakeups on the defensive line. There's no question about that. Larry Ogunjobi is in Buffalo, and he got suspended. But we at least know of several. Daniel Equale is here, who was starting on the Patriots last year. Better run defender than pass rusher type guy, but a guy who should make the roster no less. And so we're going to come down to a battle, Shayne, for that last roster spot. We're talking about Isaiah Loudermilk, Logan Lee, DeMarvin Leal, Dean Lowry. Like, there's one spot there and 4 or 5 players fighting for it. Who do you think ends up emerging from that?
I think this is really tough because this defensive line group is deeper than it's been going into camp in a while. And this was a group that was consistently deep for a long time with this team. And then it kind of took a little bit of a step back for a bit. But now there's a ton of guys who at least have an argument to be able to make the roster. But I think there's a couple guys that we're going to see for the last time. Frankly, I do think that a guy like Isaiah Loudermilk, just at this point, what are we doing with that? Like, no hate to him, but like I think we kind of know what's going on there. I think adding a guy like Equale kind of makes him, especially like, just, you don't need that with a guy. You can get that same, if not probably better production if he needs to come in than you could from Loudermilk. I think Y.A. Black apparently is a defensive end, which is frustrating as all hell. Like, I'm sorry, it just is. Like, we've talked about this before. Guys, came in like 350 during minicamp or whatever it was. That's not a defensive
352 was the report from Teresa Barley.
And like 352, I'm all for him being 352 if he plays nose tackle. Yes. But apparently he's not. Apparently that's good old Keanu Benton again, throwing him in the middle of the defense, telling him to hang out. Like, it's so like I don't know what to do with him, because like if he's asked to play defensive end, is he going to look good at doing that? Probably not. So he's a 5th-round pick, so he probably sticks around, but you never know. DeMarvin Leal, like, he's the one where I'm like, man, I don't know what to do with you. Like, they can't decide what position he plays. So what are you supposed to do with that? You know, I was hoping maybe last year he'd get a chance to be in the mix, and then he gets hurt, obviously. So that sucks for him. But is he going to stick on this roster? I don't personally think so at this point. Like, he just hasn't gotten to show anything. And when he has played, he hasn't done anything. So I don't know.
Yeah, Shayne, I will say that Leal hasn't been good, but the Steelers failed him as much as
Oh,
he
for
failed
sure.
them. Like
Absolutely.
what was the plan with this guy? You drafted a 283-pound 4-3 base edge, and you never found a position for him. So I don't think that that's going to work out. I think that he's going to be out this year. I don't think he makes it through his rookie deal. Loudermilk, you talked about, came back on that 1-year veteran minimum contract. He's just offered next to nothing for the Pittsburgh Steelers over these past 4 years. And it was like, does it really benefit you? Like I just wrote an article on Loudermilk, and he played his most snaps as a rookie. He was his most productive as a rookie. Everything is kind of gone downhill from there. He's been a part-time player, if you can even call him that, and he just hasn't offered the team anything. I'm going to give a big, bold prediction right now, and it might not be that bold. You might agree with me here. YA Black is a roster lock. He is a roster lock because, and this is my reasoning. This is my reasoning, Shayne. Not only did the Steelers lose Ogunjobi, which again, I think they're very different positions, but the Steelers apparently don't. But they, outside of Cam Hayward, they had nobody on that defensive line who could even come close to defending the run with any sort of consistency. YA Black is big and he is strong. You put on the Iowa tape. He is not a great athlete, but he can take on double team blocks. He doesn't get moved easily. And so I would have to assume the Steelers will pick up on that and they will see, well, at least we need to keep one guy who is a bullish run defender, is not going to get bullied around here. And so I'm going to call him a roster lock already. I think his job on the roster, Shayne, is every bit as safe as Will Howard's. And maybe I'll be eating my words a month from now, but we'll see how this goes. Let's move on to our next positional group here. Let's talk about the edge rushers. The top 4 are very easy to figure out, especially with how high the Steelers were on Jack Sawyer coming out. And for what it's worth, and again, Shayne, you and I have had lots of discussions about Sawyer. We're not the biggest fans of his game. We think that he is a pretty stiff and upright edge rusher overall. But for what it's worth, Dane Brugler, Daniel Jeremiah, the guys that comprise the NFL Draft Expert Consensus Board, made up of the top NFL draft experts, comprised by Marcus Mosher, he was 75th. He was a 75th overall player. So the Steelers, pound for pound, got one of the biggest steals in the draft, if you want to call him that, at least in comparison to the consensus board. Now, I think that he was closer to on par with where they drafted him, probably should have been about where he should have gone anyway. But NFL draft experts disagree. They thought that he should have been taken a round or even 2 earlier than he did. All that's to say, I think that there's almost no chance somebody beats him out for that edge 4 job. And the first 3 we don't need to discuss. It's TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig.
Yeah, again, he's going to be the 4th edge. I think it's pretty comfortable that that's going to be the case. As a 4th round pick, and just with the rest of the depth there, there's not going to be the same. They don't have the same investment made in them. They don't have probably the same ability as a run defender, if nothing else. Again, do I think Jack Sawyer is the 75th best player in the draft based on consensus? No. I think he's closer to 275th and 75th, frankly, but that's beside the point. They drafted him at a value compared to what, again, experts believe, and I do think he'll fill that 4th edge role. Now, will he ever be more than a 4th edge? I don't think so. But with the way this team is played around with the edge rush position, I'm glad at least they even have somebody they invested anything in the 4th edge. So I guess from that perspective, I can't be complaining too much. But that does seem like the very obvious situation here. So they'll keep 4 most likely, and he will be that 4th one.
Yeah, there have been times where they've had 2 or 3, and then that 4th guy has to come in and see the field, and it was bad. What am I thinking of? 2022, Malik, this guy was from the Broncos before. Malik Reed.
Yes,
and he was atrociously bad.
Was a decent player for the Broncos before that, but he couldn't do anything for us. It was horrendous.
Yeah, it was not good. So it's nice to at least have some depth here. I agree with you. He's probably not going to be more than an edge 4, maybe an edge 3 year or 2 down the line. But
maybe.
I mean, I don't think there's a lot of upside to be had here. I do want to note, Shayne, that technically the Steelers could have a 91-man roster with Julius Welshkoff, the international player, being that exception player. So you could have 5 edges. Technically, you can only dress 45 players per game anyway. Plus your emergency quarterback now. So I don't think it makes a difference. It's basically the equivalent of keep another guy in the practice squad, if you will. All right, let's move on and talk about the off-ball linebackers here. This one's interesting as well because you know that Queen's going to be here. He's going to be starting. Peyton Wilson's going to start alongside him now that Landon Robertson's gone. The Steelers paid Malik Harrison. There's a questionable contract, but they paid him, so he's going to be here. Those are your three locks. Now, outside of that, they drafted Carson Bruner in the 6th round, who I think is at least a quality player and can potentially fill the Tyler Matakavich role. They also have Cole Holcomb coming back, or at least attempting that difficult NFL comeback from a major knee injury, that gruesome knee injury suffered halfway through the 2023 season. Never saw the field for a game last year, but he looks rocked up. He looks like he's in shape. He's moving really well. If he can return to where he was at least 85, 90% before the injury, maybe he could be the linebacker 3 on this team.
Yeah, I think there's 4 guys who we can confidently pencil in, and it's the top 3 guys you hope if Holcomb's healthy, with Queen, Wilson, and Holcomb, and then you have Malik Harrison, who they did pay a decent amount of money to come over to potentially be that kind of a Landon Roberts replacement. I don't think that's going to work out that great personally, but I wish they would have kept him, but it is what it is. Those 4 I'm pretty confident about. After that, you get into, like you said, Carson Bruner makes a lot of sense as a special teamer. Guy's a good athlete. Obviously, we know there's Steelers connections there with the Bruner last name. And, you know, Mark Robinson's been hanging around for a long time. I think his days are unfortunately probably over with that Bruner pick. That's just kind of my guess. I think they made that pick kind of to replace him in a lot of ways as kind of like the special teams guy. That's probably it, right? Like you're probably keeping, 5 guys at most. I think Bruner will be that 5th guy. Now, as far as Holcomb goes, I think I've said this either on this show or I've just said it maybe in an article at some point. I think that if Holcomb is 100% healthy, he's the second best linebacker on the team behind Peyton Wilson. I do think he's a better player than Patrick Queen when he's healthy. Will he be the Cole Holcomb he was before he was injured? Probably not. It was a serious injury, so I'm not going to say he is the second best linebacker on the team, but I think he could be. So that's just kind of where we're at with him. I do hope that he is able to play and be healthy. And then maybe at some point, if Queen is struggling, we have somebody who we can slot in there without asking Peyton Wilson to do too much when he's still trying to figure himself out a little bit. So that I do like the linebacker room, but I do think it shakes out the way that you kind of laid out as well.
Yeah. And Holcomb was a underrated linebacker, I thought, during his first rookie contract in Washington. And then he goes to Pittsburgh in 2023. I thought he was well deserving of the contract he signed with Pittsburgh before that injury. Obviously, the injury can really impact his play. So we'll have to see if he still has got it left in the tank there, if he can still move the way he did before, because he was a phenomenal athlete too. Like testing wise and everything. You go back to his combine numbers. He was a really good athlete. I agree with you, Mark Robinson. I think this is his last stand here. And I think he ultimately gets beat out by Carson Bruner, who is the draft pick, who is the son of Mark Bruner, former Steelers tight end. And just knowing that he's got that rookie contract, he's the most recent investment. He's the younger guy. He's the better athlete. And so I think that that job goes to him ultimately there. All right, let's move on to almost finished here. Let's move over to the secondary and talk about the cornerback position real quickly. Boy, you want to talk about just an overhaul in one off season. Joey Porter Jr. is still here. He needs a bounce back season, and hopefully we see some positive signs during training camp this year. He's going to be accompanied this year not by Dante Jackson and Beanie Bishop, but by Darius Slay and Jalen Ramsey. So that's quite the difference there. Now it's their older corners, but we'll see if they still have anything left in the tank. Shayne, it should certainly be better than the combination of cornerbacks that we saw last year. I'm also still very high on Corey Trice Jr. Like, I think, again, it's the moments that's going to stick out in everybody's mind is him being asked to cover Jamar Chase one-on-one on an island. But I thought when he has played, and it's been sparing, he's missed his whole rookie season with the ACL. Last year, he tore his hamstring and missed the whole middle of the season. When he's played, I thought he's been pretty impressive. He can play dime backer. He can play safety, outside corner. So I think that he serves as the dime role. I think that he's the cornerback 4 in the dime role. And I think that Bishop gets pushed even further down the list now and is probably only going to see the field if injuries occur. Steelers also drafted Dante Kent at cornerback. And so it's kind of messy right now. The top 3 guys couldn't be more secure, I believe, especially with the guaranteed money given to Darius Slay. I would go as far to say even cornerback 4 is secure in Corey Trice. I just think the talent is too good. There's, again, assuming he can make it through camp without an injury, he should be the cornerback 4, and that leaves us room for 1 or 2 more is all that we have, Shayne, on this team. And historically, they've kept 5 before, so that might only be room for Beanie Bishop after that.
And I think the concern with that for Beanie Bishop is Brandon Echols, I think, is going to make this roster too, signing a 2-year, $6 million deal. So he could be.
That's true. That's not chump change. Yeah, I didn't like that contract at all.
Didn't either that much, but I think he's going to make the team. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't. So I think if they keep 5, Bishop is potentially the odd man out there because Echols can play the slot and outside. Like he can do a little bit of everything. Maybe not particularly great, but he can do it. Bishop would be the one that might have to kind of fight for his job a little bit in training camp. He wasn't undrafted free agent last year, obviously, played a lot, but they bring in Ramsey, who's we assume is going to be the primary kind of slot guy. They might move guys in and out of that role, but probably going to be the primary slot. His role might be so diminished that they don't feel the need to keep him around, which would be unfortunate. I think he deserves to be on a roster, and he probably would make someone else's team if he does not make the Steelers. But if they keep 6, I think he's clearly the 6th, and then you go into like other guys down the roster that probably aren't going to have a chance. Like James Pierre probably run his course as like a special teams kind of guy. Dante Kent just feels like a guy that's probably a practice squad player initially. Maybe he eventually makes the roster, but probably a practice squad guy to start. And those are really only 2 that I would really even mention, especially specifically at corner. But it's that group. The top 4 I'm comfortable with right now. It's the depth is like I don't know.
And I guess it depends on do they keep a 6th corner this year. Either way, it's going to take a miracle for Dante Kent to make the team and not start his career on the practice squad. Right. But I wouldn't rule out James Pierre either completely, just because he's always been that staple as the special teams player. They do need guys that can be gunners. And the last time Corey Trice did it, he just in the open field just tore his hamstring.
So maybe you don't want him maybe you don't want him doing it.
So maybe they would reserve an extra spot there, and they would cut back somewhere else in the roster. We can go through this later as well.
Yeah, we'll do it.
Definitely keep an eye on that positional group, obviously, because it's tight and there's a lot of bodies there, and there's going to be some decent players that are getting left off of that 53-man roster when it's all said and done. All right, Shayne, one more positional group before we wrap up this long show today. Let's talk about the safety position. No Minkah Fitzpatrick, which who would have thought that was going to be? Who had that on their bingo card for this training camp?
Who had most of anything we've done on their bingo card, to be fair?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, the Steelers did give Deshaun Elliott a contract, much deserved. I thought he had a really good season, first year in Pittsburgh last year. So now it's like, all right, who is that safety opposite of him? Juan Thornhill is going to step in as of now. I hear you're squinting. Shayne, I really believe this is one position. If you're trying to maximize this 2025 window, you got to cover your bases at safety. You need to go out and get somebody better than Juan Thornhill, because his last 2 years in Cleveland were rough. I think he's allowed 127 passer rating over that span. He's gotten killed down the field. He's lacked effort at times. Like, I'm not comfortable with that. And I don't think you need to have a great safety by any means. I think that safety is kind of a dying position, especially if you're playing like deep safety, cover 2 safety. Like, you don't have to have an elite.
I think the traditional safety roles are kind of starting to go away a little bit.
Yes, it's today is the quick passing game, 5 to 10 to 15-yard passes. Like, they need somebody else there, though. I would feel comfortable with Julian Blackmon, anybody else.
Blackmon is the name that I keep looking at when I'm looking at safeties and free agency and like options. He's not a spectacular player, but I'm much more comfortable with him in the back end than I am on Thornhill at this point. Like, Thornhill had his moments as a Chief, especially. He was a good player. Not at this point, it seems. And I'd at least want them to add somebody to this group that could theoretically compete with him, if nothing else, right?
Yeah.
Because right now they really don't. I mean, I like Sebastian Castro. I think he's more of a slot player than a safety, truly. Just the range isn't particularly great. I think the instincts are good, though, so he could be like a box safety, but that's what Deshaun Elliott is hopefully going to be again this year, right? So right now they just don't have that guy that can help keep the top on the defense. And unless they're going to completely overhaul how they kind of do their deep coverage and not do a lot of the stuff they did with Minkah, which would make sense with him not being there, that's a role they need to have. And unfortunately, we know this team doesn't change things very much. So I think they're still going to ask somebody to do that stuff. It just won't be as good if it's not Minka, probably.
So Shayne, I would flat out say this is the weakest position on the roster outside of Deshaun Elliott. You don't have a safety you can trust. Miles Killebrew, excellent special teamer, but if he has to see the field, it's as that box type.
Yeah, he's basically a linebacker at this.
And that's the thing. You mentioned Sebastian Castro. There's a lot of people that had a 6th, 7th round grade, a draftable grade on him.
Yeah.
Fell and became the Steelers' high priority free agent. I just have a hard time trusting a safety that runs a 4.6, quite frankly.
Yeah, especially in the role that we're missing now, right?
Yes.
It'd be different if we needed somebody to be a box safety.
Closer to the line of scrimmage. Yeah. But if you are the last line of defense and you don't have speed, I'm a little bit concerned about that. Really not speed or NFL experience. So combination is a little bit scary there. We'll see, though. There's definitely a path for him to make the roster now that Minka is not on the team.
I think for sure,
Obviously, those chances will go down significantly if the Steelers go out and sign another safety. Quindell Johnson is also there. I wouldn't expect him to make the team. I think they're going to keep 4. I don't see you using an extra resource at that position where the depth is weak. So that's where we are right now. And anything else, Shayne? You all set?
No, again, I think this is a good way to kind of kick things off before training camp starts next week, to just kind of talk about what each position on the roster kind of looks like, right? Like where we're at with things. And I think for the most part, I don't have a ton of questions left about this team that I think can be answered at this point. Like probably adding another safety, and still maybe, again, we talked about Jauan Jennings, looking at receiver and playmaker, even with Johnny Smith coming aboard, because again, how that's going to work out, we're not sure. That's really the 2 things left that I would say are like priorities they could still look at. And we did mention offensive line depth. It's just hard to find it. It just is. Like there's a reason why a lot of teams are like 6 deep, you hope. And the 6 guys they have, half of them are guys they actually feel good about. There's a reason for that. Like it's hard in the NFL. So I would be shocked if they find anything worthwhile, right, at depth at that position. So.
Agreed. All right. We go live on this show every single Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. Also check out Josh Yorish's show. He goes live on Mondays at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. Thank you for joining us on the show today. You can follow Shayne on X at Shayne Kubas. You can follow me on X at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Still Curtain podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also check us out on YouTube or ask Alexa to play the Still Curtain Steelers podcast. And thanks again for listening to the Still Curtain podcast.